The grand chamber of the Galactic Concordate stretched wide enough to hold 17 different atmosphere bubbles. Each bubble contained representatives from the 47 member species that ruled over thousands of worlds. The crystalline Vextari floated in their methane environment, their bodies casting rainbow patterns across the walls. The ancient Murthani, massive and slow-moving, occupied the largest space with their thick, humid air. The insectoid Kresh clicked and chittered in their nitrogen bubble, while the aquatic delphines swam lazy circles in their water sphere. At the smallest bubble, near the back of the chamber, stood Ambassador Sarah Chen. She wore a simple gray suit and carried a data tablet. Her bubble contained regular oxygen and nitrogen, the air that humans breathed. She had stood in this same spot for 5 years now, representing humanity in the Council's debates. Today's session concerned what the Council called the human problem. The Vextari speaker, Crystalline Lord Vexanth, pulsed with cold blue light as it addressed the assembly. Its voice came through the translation system, flat and emotionless. We gathered to discuss the latest petition from the human delegation. For the 5th time in 20 years, they request full voting privileges and a seat on the Security Council. Murmurs rippled through the various atmosphere bubbles. The Murthani representative, Elder Thulmora, shifted its massive bulk. When it spoke, its voice rumbled like distant thunder. The humans are still too young. They achieved faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago. Most species here have explored the stars for thousands of years. They are emotional, added the Kresh ambassador, mandibles clicking rapidly. They make decisions based on feelings rather than logic. This is dangerous in galactic governance. Ambassador Chen stood quietly listening. She had heard these arguments before. Many times a reptilian Soran hissed softly. The humans cling to primitive concepts. They speak constantly of individual rights and personal freedom. They have not evolved beyond such base thinking. They are violent, another voice added. Their history is filled with wars. They barely survived their own nuclear age. Such aggression has no place in our peaceful concordat. The Vextari speaker pulsed again. Ambassador Chen, you may address the council. Sarah stepped forward to the edge of her bubble. She touched her tablet and projected statistics into the shared holographic space above the chamber floor. Honored council members, she began, her voice steady. Humanity has been a loyal member of the Concordat for 50 years. In that time, we have contributed significantly to the community of worlds. She gestured to the holographic displays. Humans currently serve in emergency response teams across 214 worlds. We staff 70% of the Concordat's disaster relief operations. Human medical personnel have pioneered cross-species treatment protocols that have saved millions of lives. The Murthani representative waved a massive appendage dismissively. We do not dispute that humans are useful, but usefulness does not equal readiness for leadership. We manage 60% of active conflict mediations, Sarah continued, her voice never rising. Human peacekeepers serve in zones that other species find distasteful, interrupted a Felisian representative, its feline features twisted in disdain. Yes, we know. Humans volunteer for dangerous work because they are reckless. We volunteer because it needs to be done, Sarah said quietly. The Vextari speaker pulsed with a pattern that indicated finality. The council has heard the human petition. We shall vote. It paused, its crystalline structure refracting light. All in favor of granting humanity full voting privileges and Security Council representation? 4 lights appeared in the chamber. Only 4 out of 47, all opposed? 43 lights illuminated the space. The petition is denied, the Vextari announced. However, the Council recognizes human contributions. We offer humanity extended probationary status for an additional 100 years. At that time, we shall reconsider. 100 years. Sarah felt something cold settle in her chest, but her face remained calm. 100 years meant that none of the current human ambassadors would live to see another vote. It meant their children might not see it. Perhaps their grandchildren. It was a dismissal disguised as an opportunity. Elder Thulmora's voice boomed across the chamber. The humans should be grateful. Most species wait 300 years for full membership. We are being generous. Sarah looked around the chamber at the representatives of species who called themselves advanced and enlightened. She saw their self-satisfaction, their certainty that they were superior to the emotional, primitive humans. She thought of the human crews working double shifts on the waste processing stations that kept the council worlds clean. She thought of the human teachers in frontier schools where no other species wanted to work. She thought of the human miners extracting dangerous materials in radiation-soaked asteroid belts. She thought of the human negotiators who spent years away from Earth, living in conflict zones, trying to prevent wars between species who looked down on them. The humans who ran toward danger while others ran away. The humans who took night shifts and hazard pay and thanked everyone for the opportunity. The humans who believed that helping others mattered more than recognition. Ambassador Chen, the Vextari's voice broke through her thoughts. Do you accept the Council's decision? Sarah took a slow breath. She had been authorized to make this decision alone. Earth's government had given her full discretion, trusting her judgment after 5 years of watching the Council's patterns. She touched her tablet and sent a pre-written message. It would reach every human settlement in concordate space within the hour. It would reach Earth in 2 days. Then she looked up at the assembled species and smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was genuine. Yes, she said clearly. Humanity accepts the Council's decision. We respect your wishes completely. Relief was visible across the chamber. The Council members had expected anger. Perhaps threats, maybe even a dramatic withdrawal of human workers. But this polite acceptance, it confirmed what they believed about humanity, that humans knew their place. We thank the Council for 50 years of education and cooperation, Sarah continued. We have learned so much from you, about civilization, about governance, about how advanced species treat their junior partners. Some representatives nodded, pleased with what they heard as gratitude. Humanity will respect the Council's decision, Sarah said, completely. She bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that humans had learned from observing other species. Then she gathered her tablet and walked toward the exit of her atmosphere bubble. Behind her, the Council moved on to other business. A trade dispute between the Philesian Collective and the Kresh Hive. Tariff negotiations. Border adjustments. The ordinary work of galactic governance. They did not notice that Ambassador Chen had not promised to stay. They did not notice that she had not pledged continued human service. They did not notice that respecting the Council's decision could mean many things. They simply felt satisfied that the human problem had been resolved for another century. In the corridor, outside the chamber, Sarah walked past the portraits of previous council sessions, paintings and holograms showing the great moments of concordate history. She did not appear in any of them, despite attending 5 years of daily sessions. She reached the Human Embassy section and entered her office. The walls displayed images of Earth, oceans and mountains, cities and forests. The planet humans had left to join the stars. The planet they had represented with pride and hope. Sarah sat at her desk and opened a secure channel to Earth. The transmission would take 2 days to arrive, but the decision had already been made. The message she had sent to all human settlements contained simple instructions. Begin preparation for departure. No anger, no protest, no threats, just a quiet exit. Because humanity had finally learned the most important lesson the Galactic Concordate could teach. Some teachers show you what to become. Others show you what to avoid. The Council had just finished teaching. Now humanity would respectfully decline to attend any more classes. The announcement arrived 24 hours after the Council vote. It appeared simultaneously on every public broadcast channel in concordate space. No dramatic music, no angry rhetoric, just Ambassador Sarah Chen standing before the Earth flag, speaking in her calm, professional voice. The Galactic Concordate has rendered its decision regarding humanity's petition for full membership, she said. We respect this decision completely. After careful consideration, humanity has chosen to withdraw from concordate space to pursue our own path among the stars. All human personnel will depart within 30 days. We thank the Council for 50 years of cooperation and wish all member species continued prosperity. The message lasted 43 seconds. Then it ended. In the Council chambers on Central Station, the Vextari speaker watched the broadcast with its primary sensory cluster. Around it, other representatives gathered, their various forms creating a strange assembly of galactic diversity. Well, said the Philesian ambassador, grooming its whiskers. That is unexpected, but not unwelcome, added a Kresh diplomat. The humans always were too emotional. Better they leave before causing problems. Elder Thilmora shifted its massive body. They seemed almost relieved. Perhaps they finally understand they were not ready for full membership. The Vextari pulsed with a color indicating agreement. The Concordat functioned perfectly well before humanity arrived. We shall function perfectly well after they depart. This solves our problem quite neatly. None of them considered that the problem might not be solved. None of them wondered what would replace 50 years of human presence. They simply felt satisfied that the emotional primitives had accepted reality. Across the Concordat, humans began packing. On the medical station orbiting the Murthani homeworld, Dr. James Coe stripped his office walls of personal photos. His colleague, a Murthani named Thelnos, watched with confusion. "You are truly leaving?" Thelnos asked. "But your research into cross-species immunity protocols, who will continue it?" James carefully wrapped a picture of his daughter. "I assume someone from the council species will take over. But none of us have studied the interactions between 47 different immune systems. This is your specialization. Then I guess you'll need to start learning," James said gently. "I recommend beginning with the Felician Kresh protein incompatibility. That's the easiest to understand." Thelnos was silent for a long moment. "How long will it take to learn what you know?" "I've been studying it for 23 years, James said, so a while." On the mining station in the Kepler belt, the human crew finished their last shift. They had spent 15 years extracting rare metals from radiation-soaked asteroids, work that paid well precisely because most species refused to do it. The station manager, a Sauron named Cresisthal, checked the roster in disbelief. "All 48 humans? Every single one?" "Every single one," confirmed crew chief Maria Santos. "Our replacements should arrive soon." "There are no replacements," Cresthal hissed. "We posted the jobs. No one applied." Maria shrugged. "Not my problem anymore. The radiation shielding needs maintenance every 6 days. The extraction equipment requires calibration every morning. And whatever you do not skip the decontamination protocols. Trust me on that. Wait, you cannot leave. Who will work the mines?" But Maria was already walking toward the transport shuttle, her crew behind her. In the education centers on 17 different worlds, human teachers said goodbye to their students. Many cried. Some aliens cried too, though their species claimed to be above such emotional displays. A young Vextari student, barely old enough to have formed its first crystalline layer, pulsed sadly at its teacher. "Why must you go, Teacher Lin?" The human woman knelt beside the small crystal being. "Because your council doesn't think my species is ready to have a voice. And we've decided they're right, we're not ready to stay where we're not valued. But you taught me math. You taught me to read Terran literature. You taught me that emotions are not weakness." Lynn smiled through her tears. "Then I taught you the most important lessons. Remember them." On the peacekeeping stations scattered across border zones, human negotiators closed their files. They had spent years learning alien languages, studying cultural nuances, building trust between species that had hated each other for centuries. Commander Rafe Okonkwo stood in the neutral zone between the Felician and Kresh territories, where he had negotiated 17 separate treaties. A Felician officer approached him. "You are leaving now? But we are close to a breakthrough with the Kresh regarding the disputed mining rights." "I've left my notes in the database," Rafe said. "Everything you need to continue. But the Kresh trust you. They do not trust us. It took you 4 years to build that trust." Rafe looked at the Felician with tired eyes. "Then I suggest you start building. You have 4 years of my notes to study. Learn from them." 4 years, the Felician whispered. "We do not have 4 years. The fragile peace will shatter within months without a neutral mediator." Rafe said nothing. He had spent those 4 years living in a cold station, eating recycled food, missing his family on Earth. He had done it because he believed it mattered, because he believed that preventing war was worth personal sacrifice. But the Council had made its position clear. Human sacrifice was expected. Human voices were not welcome, so he walked away. On Central Station, a Vextari maintenance supervisor reviewed the duty roster for the station's waste processing system. 17 humans worked there, handling the dangerous chemicals and biological waste that kept the station habitable for 47 different species. 17 human names on the roster. 17 notices of resignation, 0 applications to replace them. The supervisor pulsed with colors indicating distress and confusion. Who would do this work? Who wanted to spend their days processing waste in radiation suits? Apparently only humans. The 30 days passed quickly. Human ships arrived at every station, every colony, every outpost where humans worked. They were efficient and organized. No property was damaged. No contracts were broken that could not be legally terminated. No debts were left unpaid. Humans simply gathered their belongings, said their goodbyes, and left. Some aliens watched with indifference. Others watched with growing unease. A few tried to convince humans to stay, offering higher pay or better positions. But the answer was always the same. Thank you, but no. We're going home. Except home was not Earth. The human ships gathered at the border of concordate space, forming a massive fleet, thousands of vessels, transports, workers' barges, small personal craft, and a few diplomatic ships. On day 29, Ambassador Chen stood on the bridge of the lead vessel. Behind her, the concordate space stations glowed with the light of 1,000 worlds. Ahead, the darkness of independent space beckoned. She opened a final communication channel to Central Station. This is Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing humanity's final departure from concordate space. We have removed all human personnel from your territories. All contracts have been fulfilled or appropriately terminated. All properties have been returned or transferred according to law. She paused, looking at the stars. We arrived 50 years ago with hope. We leave with education. Thank you for teaching us what we needed to learn. We wish the Galactic Concordat wisdom and prosperity. Another pause. Goodbye. The channel closed. The human fleet turned as one and jumped to faster than light speed. In seconds, they vanished into the dark. On Central Station, the Vexdari speaker watched them go. Around it, other council members had gathered to witness the departure. Well, said Elder Thulmora, that is done. Indeed, agreed the Vexdari. Life will return to normal now. But even as it spoke, the first emergency alerts began appearing on the station's systems. A waste processing backup, a medical emergency with no cross-species specialists available, a freight shipment delayed because no pilots had filed for the dangerous deep space route. Small problems, minor inconveniences. Nothing the advanced species of the Concordat could not handle. At least, that is what they told themselves as they returned to their quarters, not yet understanding that normal had just left with the humans, not yet realizing that the quiet departure was not the end of the story. It was the beginning of consequences. In the darkness of space, the human fleet traveled toward coordinates that only they knew, toward worlds they had quietly claimed during 50 years of exploration, toward a future they would build without the Council's permission. Ambassador Chen stood at the viewing port, watching the stars stream past. Beside her, a young officer spoke nervously. Do you think they will be all right? The Concordat? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Eventually, she finally said, after they learned some difficult lessons, should we have warned them? Sarah smiled sadly. We tried. For 50 years we tried. But some species can only learn through experience. She turned away from the window. Now they will experience what they voted for, a Concordat without humans. Behind them, across thousands of light years, that experience was about to begin. The first day without humans was barely noticeable. Central Station's operations continued normally. The Council convened for its regular session. Trade vessels came and went. The Concordat's thousands of worlds spun through space as they always had. A few systems showed minor delays. Emergency response times increased by 12 minutes on average. Some administrative processes took longer. The cafeteria on Central Station ran out of certain foods because the usual supply freighter had not arrived on schedule. Small things, nothing important. On the second day, the problems began to show teeth. The Vexdari colony of Prism 9 was a beautiful world of crystal formations and methane seas. 3 million Vexdari lived there, their crystalline bodies refracting the light of their blue sun into rainbow patterns. It was considered one of the jewels of the Concordat. The colony's geological monitoring system detected unusual seismic activity at Oro 400 local time. The automated system triggered an alert that should have gone to the emergency response team. The system was designed by humans. It was maintained by humans. It was monitored by humans, but there were no humans anymore. The alert went to a Vexdari technician who had been trained to watch for such warnings, but had never actually responded to one. The seismic readings looked unusual, but not immediately catastrophic. The technician filed a report for review during normal business hours. At 8:23, 3 volcanoes erupted simultaneously. The lava was not the main danger. Vexdari could tolerate extreme heat. The problem was the ash and debris that filled the methane atmosphere, making it toxic even for crystalline beings. The problem was the speed of the eruption, giving no time for evacuation. The problem was that the human disaster response team, which had practiced evacuation procedures for exactly this scenario, was gone. By the time Prism 9's colonial government organized their own response, 300,000 Vexidari had died. Many more were injured. The survivors huddled in sealed shelters waiting for help that arrived too slowly. On Central Station, the Vexidari speaker received the casualty reports in stunned silence. Its crystalline structure pulsed with colors of grief and confusion. "The monitoring system failed?" it asked. "No," the technician explained, its light flickering with shame. "The monitoring system worked perfectly. I did not understand the warning signs. The humans always knew what the readings meant." "Then we shall learn," the speaker said firmly. "We are an advanced species. We do not need humans to read sensors, but learning would take time." And the 300,000 dead Vexdari did not have time. On the third day, the supply problems became critical. Freight vessels sat empty at docking stations. The long-haul routes between distant sectors, routes that took weeks of travel through dangerous deep space, had no pilots. Humans had flown those routes. Humans had considered the high pay and isolation acceptable trade-offs. Other species found the routes boring, dangerous, or beneath their dignity. Without the freight shipments, colonies began reporting shortages, medical supplies, food that could not be grown locally, manufacturing components, small things at first, but the shortage list grew longer every hour. On the Murthani homeworld, a different crisis emerged. A plague had appeared in the southern provinces. It spread quickly, jumping between Murthani hosts with aggressive speed. The symptoms were painful but not immediately fatal: fever, organ inflammation, breathing difficulty. The colonial medical centers called for help from the Central Research Hospital. They needed specialists in cross-species disease, experts who could determine if the plague might spread to other species living on the Murthani world. The hospital administrator, a Murthani named Grelkor, searched the staff database with growing panic. 23 cross-species disease specialists had worked at the hospital. 22 had been human. The last specialist, a Felisian named Dr. Raskel, arrived within the hour. Grelkor met her at the entrance, hope in its voice. "Thank you for coming so quickly. We need your expertise to—" "I am not an expert," Dr. Raskel interrupted, her feline features tight with stress. "I assisted the human researchers. I took samples. I ran basic tests. But the actual analysis, the cross-species protein interactions, the mutation predictions, that was Dr. Koh's team. But surely you learned—" "I learned to follow their instructions," Raskel said quietly. "I never learned to think like they did. They saw patterns that made no sense to me. They predicted outcomes I could never anticipate." She looked at the hospital with something like fear. "I will help however I can. But I cannot do what they did." The plague spread. Without the human researchers to predict its evolution or develop cross-species protocols, it crossed into the Felisian population within 4 days. Then the Kresh. Then the Sarans. It was not fatal to most species, but it was painful and debilitating. Millions fell ill. Economic activity slowed. Panic grew. On the 4th day, the first violence erupted. The border zone between Felisian and Kresh territory had been tense for decades. Old hatreds, territorial disputes, cultural differences, all the usual ingredients for conflict. For the past 4 years, Commander Rafe Okonkwo had maintained a fragile peace through careful negotiation and patient mediation. Commander Okonkwo was gone. A Felisian patrol encountered a Kresh mining operation in what both sides claimed as their territory. Words were exchanged. Weapons were drawn. Shots were fired. 3 Felisians died. 5 Kresh died. Both sides called for reinforcements. The neutral peacekeeping force tried to intervene, but without human mediators trusted by both sides because humans had no territorial ambitions in that sector, Neither side would talk. Neither side would back down. Within 24 hours, the skirmish had escalated into a full battle. Hundreds dead, thousands wounded, ships burning in space. Similar conflicts erupted in 3 other border zones. Old disputes that humans had carefully managed suddenly exploded into violence without neutral peacekeepers to diffuse tensions. On the 5th day, the infrastructure began failing. Space stations reported critical system failures, life support glitches, power fluctuations, waste processing backups that threatened to make entire sections of stations uninhabitable. Investigation revealed a common thread. All the failing systems were in high radiation zones, toxic environments, or areas with extreme conditions. The systems had been maintained by workers who could tolerate such environments for short periods with proper protection. Workers who were human. Other species could do the work, technically, but they found it unpleasant, degrading below their station, the kind of work that junior species should handle, except the junior species had left. On Central Station, the maintenance supervisor finally found a Sauron willing to enter the waste processing chamber to fix a critical pump. The pay was triple the normal rate. The Sauron emerged 30 minutes later, vomiting and swearing to never return. The pump remained broken. Without proper waste processing, sections of Central Station began to smell. Then they became toxic. Thousands of residents had to evacuate to temporary quarters, while the council desperately searched for more workers. On the 6th day, the casualty reports arrived. A mining accident in the Kepler belt had killed 48 workers when safety equipment failed. Equipment that humans had maintained daily. Equipment that the new crew had not known needed such frequent maintenance. A school transport had crashed on a frontier world, killing all 73 students aboard. The pilot had been inexperienced with the atmospheric conditions that human pilots had navigated safely for years. A research station studying a dangerous nebula had lost containment. 20 scientists dead. The humans had designed the safety protocols that prevented such failures. Each incident alone was a tragedy. Together, they painted a horrifying picture. On the 7th day, the council convened an emergency session. The chamber was full. Every species had sent representatives. The atmosphere bubbles hummed with agitated conversation. Fear had replaced the calm superiority of a week ago. The Vextari speaker pulsed with colors indicating deep distress. Its crystalline structure seemed dimmer than before. "We have reports of 42 simultaneous crises across concordate space," it announced. 300,000 dead on Prism 9. Plague spreading across the Murthani homeworld in 3 colonies. Open warfare in 4 border zones. Infrastructure failures on 17 stations. Supply chain collapse affecting hundreds of worlds. The chamber was silent as the speaker continued. Analysis indicates a common factor in all crises: the absence of human personnel in critical roles. Elder Thulmora shifted uncomfortably. Surely this is coincidence. Or temporary adjustment difficulty. We are advanced species. We can adapt, can we? The voice came from a small Philesian representative, one who had voted in favor of human membership. I have reviewed the employment records. Humans constituted 3% of our population, but filled 70% of emergency response positions, 60% of hazardous duty assignments, 85% of conflict mediation roles, 90% of volunteer humanitarian positions. Another representative, a creche who had also voted for humans, clicked its mandibles angrily. They did not tell us this. They did not warn us. They did not hide it either, the Philesian replied coldly. We simply never looked. We never noticed who was doing the work we considered beneath us. The second week began with more messages sent to humanity's last known coordinates. No response. The third message was less diplomatic. It offered apologies. It promised reconsideration of humanity's petition. It begged for help with the growing crises. No response. The fourth message offered full council membership immediately, with all voting privileges and Security Council representation. No response. In the council chamber, the Vextari speaker dimmed its lights in what other species had learned to recognize as frustration and fear. Around it, the assembled representatives showed similar signs of distress in their own ways. Drooping antennae, flat scales, slow-moving appendages. Why do they not answer? Demanded a Sauron representative. The Philesian who had voted for humanity spoke quietly. Would you answer if someone who had dismissed you for 50 years suddenly needed you? But we are offering them what they wanted. We are offering it because we need them, not because we value them. They understand the difference. Elder Thulmora rumbled with displeasure. We must focus on solutions. We cannot waste time on philosophy. But philosophy, as they would learn, had practical consequences. A young Kresh analyst named Tekli had been assigned to study the full scope of the crisis. She spent days pulling data from every concordate system, building a comprehensive picture of human involvement in galactic society. When she presented her findings to the Council in Week 2, the silence that followed was absolute. Humans represented 3% of our population, Tekli began, her mandibles clicking nervously, but they handled 70% of emergency disaster response, 85% of hazardous environment work, 60% of active conflict mediation, 90% of volunteer humanitarian operations. She brought up a holographic display showing economic data. But the deeper truth is more troubling. Humans volunteered for night shifts that other species refused. They took hazard pay positions in radiation zones, toxic environments, and high-gravity worlds. They worked in conflict zones where their lives were constantly at risk. They became teachers on frontier worlds where no other species wanted to live. They became medical researchers studying diseases that affected other species more than their own. The display shifted to show comparative wage data. They did not do this because they were paid better. In most cases, they were paid less than other species for the same work. They did it because Tekli paused, mandibles trembling. Because they believed it mattered. Because they thought helping others was more important than status or comfort. Another display appeared, showing the concordate social structure. We created a society where the unpleasant, dangerous, and unrewarding work was quietly pushed onto the junior member species, and the humans, wanting to prove themselves worthy of membership, accepted every task. They ran toward danger while we ran away. They volunteered while we delegated. They sacrificed while we benefited. The Felisian representative who had supported humanity spoke softly. We did not just lose workers. We lost the people who cared when others would not. The implications settled over the council like a heavy weight. By week 3, the cascade of failures accelerated beyond control. The plague on the Murthani homeworld had evolved into 3 separate strains, each affecting different species. Without human cross-species medical researchers to track the mutations and develop coordinated treatment protocols, each species tried to protect only their own. The result was chaos. Treatments that worked for Murthani made Felicians sicker. Quarantine protocols that contained Kresh variants allowed Soran variants to spread freely. The plague that should have been controllable with proper coordination became a pandemic. Millions fell ill. Healthcare systems collapsed. Entire worlds went into lockdown. The border conflicts expanded. Without human peacekeepers trusted by all sides, without mediators who had no territorial ambitions, the old hatreds erupted fully. The Felician-Kresh War spread to 6 systems. The Soran Dominion and the Delphine Collective reignited an ancient dispute over water rights. The crystalline Vexdari and the insectoid Kresh clashed over mining territories. Each conflict might have been prevented. Each had been prevented year after year by patient human negotiators who spent lifetimes away from Earth-building trust with alien species. But those humans were gone. The supply chain collapse rippled through every aspect of concordate life. Without human freight pilots willing to make the dangerous long-haul runs, goods stopped moving between distant sectors. Food shortages appeared on worlds that depended on imports. Medical supplies ran out in frontier clinics. Manufacturing ground to a halt without raw materials. The council offered higher wages for freight pilots. Much higher, triple the human rates a few non-human pilots accepted. They completed 1 or 2 runs, then quit. The isolation was too great. The danger was too real. The boredom was unbearable. No amount of money could make them want to spend weeks alone in deep space, jumping through regions where pirate attacks were common and rescue was days away. Humans had done it without complaint. The infrastructure failures spread like a disease. Space stations across the Concordate reported critical system failures. Life support, waste processing, power generation, water recycling. All the systems that kept millions alive in the hostile environment of space. These systems existed in harsh conditions. Radiation zones, extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres. They required constant maintenance by workers willing to enter such environments repeatedly. Workers who were human. The council tried offering enormous wages. 5 times normal pay. 10 times. They found a few workers willing to try. Most quit after 1 shift. The work was too unpleasant, too dangerous, too degrading for species that considered themselves advanced and sophisticated. Humans had done it every day. By week 4, stations began evacuating. They could not maintain basic habitability without proper system maintenance. Millions of residents relocated to planetary surfaces, straining resources on already stressed worlds. Central Station itself faced evacuation. The seat of galactic government, the symbol of concordant unity, was becoming uninhabitable because no one wanted to fix the waste processing system. The Vextari speaker stood in the council chamber, which now smelled faintly of sewage and spoke words it never imagined saying. "We are failing. The concordant is collapsing, and we did this to ourselves." Elder Thulmora tried to protest. "The humans abandoned us. This is their fault." "No." The speaker's light pulsed with a color that indicated absolute certainty. "I have reviewed the records. For 50 years, humans requested equal partnership. For 50 years, we told them they were not ready, not advanced enough, not sophisticated enough, not evolved enough." The speaker's light brightened with intensity. "The truth? We were not advanced enough to recognize what they offered. We were not sophisticated enough to value those who served without demanding glory. We were not evolved enough to see that civilization is not built by those who claim superiority. It is built by those who do the work that others refuse." The chamber was silent. "We treated them as servants," the speaker continued, "useful, convenient beneath us. We let them handle every task we found distasteful. We let them take every risk we wanted to avoid. We let them make every sacrifice we were unwilling to make. And we told ourselves it was because they were junior members who needed to prove themselves." Another Vexidari representative pulsed with disagreement, but they never complained. "They seemed happy to serve. They were trying to earn our respect," said the Felisian who had supported humanity. "They thought if they proved themselves useful enough, valuable enough, necessary enough, we would finally accept them as equals." Her feline features twisted with shame. "Instead, we proved that no amount of service would ever be enough. Because the problem was never their worthiness. It was our arrogance." A Kresh representative clicked softly. "What do we do now?" "We learn," said the Felisian. "We do the work ourselves. We stop looking for others to handle our problems. We become worthy of the word advanced. But the damage will be severe," the Vextari speaker agreed. "Millions may die before we learn what the humans knew. Decades may pass before we rebuild what we lost. Our economy will suffer. Our unity will fracture. Some species will leave the concordate." It paused, light dimming. "This is the price of our lesson. We chose arrogance over wisdom. We chose hierarchy over partnership. We chose pride over practicality. Now we pay for those choices." Reports continued flooding in. More deaths. More conflicts. More infrastructure failures. More supply shortages. 12 species announced their intention to leave the concordate within the next year. They no longer believed in the Council's ability to maintain order or provide security. They would seek their own paths. A 13th species, the Delphine Collective, announced something different. They had made contact with humanity and requested permission to join whatever new alliance the humans were building. The Council sent urgent messages demanding details. How had the Delphine contacted humanity? Where were the humans? What were their plans? The Delphine response was brief. "The humans are building something better, something based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. They have invited those who supported their equality to join them. We have accepted." More messages went to human space, more pleas for help. 3 months after humanity's departure, the Council delegation finally reached human space. It had taken that long to arrange. The humans had not made it easy. They had ignored 73 messages before finally responding with coordinates for a meeting. The message had been brief and formal, offering no warmth or encouragement. "You may send a delegation. Arrive unarmed. Request permission before entering our territory. Ambassador Chen will meet you." The delegation consisted of 5 members. The Vextari speaker, Elder Thulmora, the Felisian who had voted for humanity, a Kresh representative, and a Delphine who had requested to come as an observer before their own species departed to join the humans. Their ship crossed into human-controlled space with proper permissions and navigational guidance. What they saw during the journey surprised them. Human space was busy. Stations dotted the systems, new construction, gleaming and efficient. Freight vessels moved in steady streams between worlds. Defensive platforms protected key installations, but not aggressively. Everything looked organized and prosperous, and there were non-human ships. Many of them. Those are Delphine vessels, the Kresh representative observed. And Soran, and are those Felician? The 4 species that voted for humanity, the Felician delegate confirmed quietly. They left the Concordat to join the humans, as my people will soon do. Elder Thulmora rumbled disapprovingly. Traitors. All of you. No, the Felician replied calmly. We are simply choosing to join a civilization that values us, rather than one that tolerates us. The ship approached a large station orbiting a green-blue world. The station was clearly new, built in a style that blended human engineering with other species' designs. The architecture showed cooperation rather than domination. They docked and were escorted through corridors filled with activity. Humans worked alongside Delphine, Felicians, Saurans, and Kresh. There was talking and laughter, purpose and energy, none of the rigid hierarchy that defined Concordat stations. Ambassador Sarah Chen waited in a conference room with windows overlooking the planet below. She looked older than when she had left Central Station 3 months ago. Tired, but also somehow lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. She stood as the delegation entered. Her expression was polite but not warm. Welcome to Freedom Station, she said formally. Please sit. The delegation arranged themselves around the table. The Vextari speaker pulsed with a color indicating submission and respect, a pattern it had never shown to humans before. Ambassador Chen, it began. We come to... I know why you have come, Sarah interrupted gently. The Concordat is collapsing. Systems are failing. Conflicts are spreading. People are dying. You need help. The speaker's light flickered with shame. Yes, you sent 73 messages before this one. The early messages demanded we return. The later messages offered apologies. The final messages offered everything. Full membership, Security Council seats, equal voting rights. All of which we should have offered 50 years ago, the Vextari admitted. We were wrong. We were arrogant. We used your people as convenient servants while denying them respect and voice. We know this now. You know it now, Sarah agreed. Because you need us. If the Concordat were functioning perfectly, would you be here offering apologies? Silence. That is what I thought, Sarah said softly. Elder Thulmora shifted its massive bulk forward. Regardless of our motivations, people are dying. Surely that matters to you. You built your reputation on helping others, on running toward disaster rather than away. Has that changed? Sarah's eyes hardened. Do not try to manipulate me with our own virtues, Elder. Yes, we value helping others, but we also learned to value ourselves. And we learned something important from you. We learned to recognize when we are being exploited. She stood and walked to the window, looking down at the planet. For 50 years, humans volunteered for every difficult job. We took night shifts and hazard pay. We worked in radiation zones and conflict areas. We became teachers and doctors and peacekeepers on worlds that other species found unpleasant or beneath them. We did it because we believed in the Concordat. We believed that if we proved ourselves valuable enough, you would accept us as equals. She turned back to face them. But it was never about our value, was it? It was about your convenience. You liked having junior members to handle the work you did not want to do. You liked having a species you could feel superior to. As long as we knew our place and stayed in it, you were happy to keep us around. The Vextari speaker pulsed with colors of shame. You are correct, and we are paying the price for our arrogance. But must innocent people suffer for our mistakes? They already are, the Felician delegate said quietly. That is why 4 species have left the Concordat to join the humans. And more will follow. Elder Thulmora turned on the Felician angrily. You abandon us in our crisis? You abandoned yourselves, the Felician replied. When you built a civilization on the backs of those you claimed to be inferior. When you measured advancement by how little work you personally had to do. When you confused delegation with exploitation. Sarah returned to her seat. Let me be clear about something. Humanity is not coming back to the Concordat. Not now, not in 100 years, not ever. The Vextari's light dimmed completely. Then, we have failed. You failed 50 years ago, Sarah said. You are only noticing now. She gestured to the window, to the station beyond, to the busy space lanes filled with ships. This is the Free Coalition. Built by humans, Delphines, Sorans, Felisians, and Kresh working together as actual equals. No hierarchy. No junior members. No probationary periods. Just species cooperating because we choose to. Because we respect each other. Because we understand that everyone's contribution matters. A Kresh observer who had accompanied the Delphine spoke up. How do you manage conflicts? How do you make decisions without hierarchy? Through conversation and consensus, Sarah replied. It is slower sometimes. It requires more patience, but our decisions, when we make them, have the support of all members. No one feels forced or dismissed, but surely someone must lead. Elder Thulmora insisted. Someone must have final authority? Why? Sarah asked. The Concordat had clear leadership, clear hierarchy, clear authority. How is that working out? Silence again. The Vextari speaker pulsed weakly. What can we do? How do we fix what we have broken? Sarah considered the question carefully. You learn to do your own work. You stop looking for others to handle your problems. You become truly advanced rather than just calling yourselves advanced. That will take years, decades. Yes, it took humans decades to learn the lessons you taught us. It will take you decades to learn the lessons we are teaching you now. But the deaths will continue, Sarah said flatly, until you develop your own emergency response capabilities, until you train your own peacekeepers, until you maintain your own infrastructure. The deaths are tragic, but they are your responsibility now, not ours. Elder Thulmora stood abruptly. So you will just let us collapse? Let billions suffer? You are not collapsing, the Felisian delegate said. You are being forced to stand on your own rather than on someone else's back. There is a difference, Sarah nodded. The Concordat will survive or it will not. That depends entirely on whether you can learn to function as truly equal partners, rather than as a hierarchy of exploitation. We are not your saviors. We are not your servants. We are simply done being your convenient solution to every problem you did not want to solve yourselves. She stood, signaling the end of the meeting. I wish you well. Genuinely. I hope you learn what you need to learn. I hope you become the civilization you always claimed to be, but we will not be part of that journey. The delegation stood slowly, processing the finality in her words. And if we do learn? The Vextari asked quietly. If we become better? If we build something worth joining? Sarah smiled sadly. Then perhaps in a few generations we can talk again as actual equals, not as council and junior member, not as superior and inferior, just as different civilizations that respect each other. But not now. Not now. The delegation left Freedom Station in silence. Their return journey through human space showed them more of what they were missing. Efficient operations. Cooperative ventures. Happy workers who chose their roles rather than being exploited into them. When they crossed back into Concordat space, the contrast was immediate. Supply ships floating empty, stations showing signs of neglect, fewer vessels overall. They returned to Central Station, which still struggled with basic habitability despite 3 months of effort to fix the failing systems. The Vexidari speaker addressed the council, its light dim with exhaustion and acceptance. Humanity will not return. They have built something new, something better, and they have done it without us. The chamber erupted in protests and denials and anger, but slowly, over the following weeks, reality settled in. 12 species left the Concordat to join the Free Coalition. They were the species that had done their own difficult work, that had valued cooperation over hierarchy, that had respected humans even when the Council did not. The remaining species faced a choice: adapt or collapse. Slowly, painfully, they began adapting. Recruiting their own emergency responders, training their own peacekeepers, learning to maintain their own infrastructure. It was expensive. It was difficult. It was humbling,